Good afternoon, everyone. If you've dialed in the last few minutes, welcome to the Eventbrite and CraftJam webinar. We are here today to do a little bit of a product spotlight on the new Zoom app, which CraftJam is actively and successfully using, and then also talk a little bit more high level about one creator's success story and how they've sort of pivoted during this online event shift, and answer some of the questions that we've had submitted in our Q&A. So a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the webinar is going to go on for about an hour. We'll have roughly 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. We appreciate everyone who submitted their questions in advance. We received a lot of great questions, and some of them we were able to sort of bucket with similar themes. If you have any last minute burning questions, we won't be taking Q&A on the Zoom webinar itself because things can get a little bit lost with this large of a group, but you can navigate over to your email and submit questions through the form there. As a heads up, we have a really packed house today, so we're super excited to have everyone. We're going to try really hard to get through as many questions as possible, but as I mentioned earlier, we'll have some more touch points and send a follow-up email if we're not able to get to things. After the webinar concludes, you will see an email land in your inbox with a recap of the topics that we covered, some online event and Zoom app resources in case we don't cover your question, and a survey for feedback. We are hosting more and more webinars as an Eventbrite team. We want to try to give people timely and helpful resources, so we would love your feedback on if this was helpful and anything that we can do in the future that might be a really interesting topic for you. Lastly, I do want to mention that you may notice that we are all in our homes. So given this shelter-in-place order in most of the places that we're located, which on this call we have several different cities, we're all dialing in remotely, as are the rest of the panelists. And so bear with us if we have any technical issues or uncooperative internet. We'll, as many of you have learned in the last 6 months, we will just roll with that as it comes. All right, we can go ahead and get started. My name is Vivian Chaves. I have been working at Eventbrite for about 8 years, and I'm currently focused on our community efforts, so connecting with creators such as yourselves in various platforms. I'm so thrilled today to be with two other incredible women to talk about the Zoom app integration and online events. Our special guest today is Nora from CraftJam. Nora, I would love to just let you introduce yourselves and tell our viewers what you do and a little bit about CraftJam.
Yeah, so my name is Nora Abousteit. I'm the founder and CEO of CraftJam, and what CraftJam is, it's basically a vibrant community of crafters. Most of them are millennials. We offer unforgettable, curated small group experiences where people can craft. They learn something new to make, and they can connect amongst each other, and they can buy the supplies they need for that. It's all live stream.
Awesome. And Erika, I'll hand you the virtual microphone to introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Viv. Hi, everyone. My name is Erika Folkl, and I've been with Eventbrite for about 2.5 years. I'm based out of our Nashville office. I initially came on board to help drive our Eventbrite marketing services program, but I'm now entirely focused on both growth and operations for creator marketing tools and some new initiatives we have. This basically just means that I work really closely with product, customer success, and marketing to make sure that our creators' marketing needs are being heard, and more importantly, that they're actually being met. So glad to be here.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm so lucky to get to work with Erika on a regular basis. And I'm so thrilled to have Nora and the CraftJam team here. We've all admired the work that you're doing. And I think that for all the creators on the call, it's so great to connect with other people who are doing it and figuring things out on the fly. So here's what we're going to cover today. I'll do a little overview of the agenda so you know what to expect. First, we're going to do an overview of the Zoom app. Many of you are dialing in to learn a little bit more about this integration, how it can work for you, what the differences are. And then we're going to do a discussion with CraftJam, not only about how they're using the Zoom app and how the experience has been for their team and some of the changes that they've seen, both for their internal processes and then also for their external attendee experience. But we'll also just hear a little bit more about what CraftJam does and some of the exciting ways that they've overcome the obstacles that we're all looking at in this era of digital events. And then lastly, we'll carve out some time for some Q&A. All right.
All right, thanks, Viv. So as everyone knows, being in this world of shelter in place, we've been seeing a really big shift at Eventbrite in how creators are using the platform during this time. With all of the restrictions in place for in-person gatherings, a lot of our creators are pivoting their businesses and events online. While many are understandably doing this to drive revenue and maintain cash flow, we are seeing some other reasons why creators are choosing to pivot online. In some cases, creators are looking to maintain their fan engagement and continue to build their brand awareness. In this case, online events are a really good way to tap into new audiences. And on the other hand, some creators like CraftJam, see the opportunity to really blow the lid off of their geographic reach. So effectively, you can take your events worldwide and build an entirely new revenue stream. It's like you're no longer constrained to your local town or city. So looking at why we chose to build the Zoom app, we're almost 6 months into COVID-19, and two things have become really clear. One, our desire for human connection remains really strong, and the future of events is hybrid, meaning both in person and online, holding those two things in tension. We ran a study recently wherein we found that 57% of respondents are open to continuing to attend virtual events even after social distancing restrictions have been lifted. Really exciting signal for us and the future of online events. Additionally, some quick facts here. 62% of respondents have attended 5 or more online events in a recent month. 42% have paid between $11 and $30 to attend virtual events. And lastly, nearly half have invited others to join them virtually for the online event. So again, it's that global community that's really exciting to see. Not only are virtual events helping us feel more connected through the pandemic, but they're creating relevance for audiences far beyond the boundaries of their in-person events and giving creators more avenues for additional or continued revenue. The Eventbrite survey that I mentioned before also showed us that attendees are crossing these digital geographical borders. In that, 65% of respondents are attending events outside their state, 62 are attending outside of their city, and 28 are attending outside of their country. So now that we know that virtual and hybrid events are here to stay, our goal is to help creators navigate this new frontier and always connect with new audiences. So in order to do this, we are introducing periodically new and deeper product partnerships and apps to help optimize the online event experience. So this is where the Zoom app comes into play. Over the last 6 months, we've seen tons of creators turn to Zoom to power their online events. Like, it's kind of funny cross-generationally, like how ubiquitous Zoom has become in this world we live in now. Before the Zoom app, the problem was there was no way to integrate Zoom with Eventbrite. So if you made the decision that you wanted to make that pivot, you had to rely on a third-party tool like Zapier or do it manually, which for those of you who do events at scale or you're a one-man show, it's really clunky and really time-consuming to do it that way. So a few of the key value props of the Zoom app. First and foremost, with the app, creators can easily create new or connect their existing meetings or webinars to their events on Eventbrite. I know that's kind of a dense event-heavy sentence, but we'll unpack that in a little bit. Second, once attendees register for an event, they're automatically added as registrants to the Zoom and synced as changes are made. So if an attendee updates their info or cancels, that's all reflected on the Zoom side without a creator ever having to go into Zoom and make that change. This reduces the steps across the board that attendees and creators have to take to keep everything up to date. And finally, as you guys experience joining this webinar, the link to join the Zoom meeting or webinar that is displayed on that online events page through that Join Now button is a personalized link for each attendee. So what that means is you don't have to log in or re-register on the Zoom side. And as attendees join, they're marked as checked in on Eventbrite because we're matching those emails up. So you may be wondering, if you haven't had the chance to play with it yet, how does the Zoom app work? So I'm going to run you through each step of the user flow to give you a better idea of how it works. For these steps, I'm going to assume that you have a general familiarity with the Eventbrite platform. Maybe you've set up an event previously, or you're aware of how to set up an in-person or even online event. So in order to configure the Zoom app, you'll first want to make sure in the event setup flow that you set your event location to online event. When you select online event for your event location, it actually opens up a new step in the event creation flow. And this is what we call the online events page. After adding some basic info to your event, so think your description, you'll have a little snippet about the event, you'll hit this online event page setup. And we'll talk a little bit about this page because we did get a lot of questions on this. So what I tell creators is that you should think of the online events page as your virtual venue. This is where attendees know how to access, where to access, and when to access your online event, all in a centralized spot. So the online events page is a separate landing page, but it's viewable to attendees of your event, no one else. Here you can include any relevant information. You can include links to your webinar, your live stream. Some people choose to include images or even attachments if it's a workshop. A lot of fun things. Note that they will need to be logged into their Eventbrite account to access this page, which makes sense. You only want your attendees to see it, and we need to know who your attendees are. So if you're one of the creators who mentioned that attendees were having a hard time finding or joining your online event, this is the TLDR on where they need to go to find everything they need. One quick pro tip that I also share with creators asking about it is consider adding a blurb to your event description, letting your attendees know that once they register, they'll unlock access to this online events page that'll have everything they need to join the event. In order to unlock the Zoom app, when you're setting this up, you'll want to click this highlighted button in the screenshot that says Connect Zoom. So once you've clicked Connect Zoom, you'll first be prompted to authorize the Zoom app, and then you'll actually connect your Zoom account. Note that because this is an OAuth process, you must be an admin of your Zoom account in order to connect the app. Otherwise, you'll hit an authorization error. There are a few steps to this configuration, but we're just going to keep focus on this one screenshot because this is where we get the most questions. So on this step, you're able to either select the existing meeting or webinar you'd like to sync your Eventbrite event with. You can do that by selecting meeting or webinar in that first dropdown, and then that second dropdown will populate with those events so that you can, if you've already stood it up in Zoom, you can go ahead and connect those together. On the other hand, if you click that checkbox that says create a new Zoom, what'll actually happen is a new Zoom meeting or webinar will be created based on the details you have in your Eventbrite event. So it'll pull in the title, the time, and the description. This is really great, again, in just time savings if you're having to stand up a lot of events or if you just want to cut a step out of the process. Additionally, anytime you update those details on the Eventbrite side, so let's say that we decided we wanted to push this webinar by 2 hours and I updated that in Eventbrite, that change would automatically push to the Zoom event and update it there. But I will note that if you make a change on Zoom, it won't push back to Eventbrite. It's like a one-way street from Eventbrite to Zoom. One more call out here, because we've definitely had a couple of early users run into this. If you have webinar selected, you must also have a webinar account on Zoom. So as a lot of our veteran users will know, it's like you've got meetings as your base membership, but then you can buy access to the webinars add-on, but it doesn't come out of the box with every Zoom account. So if you select webinars, but you don't actually have that, Eventbrite is going to link up to your Zoom account and be like, oh, actually, they don't have the access they need. So we're going to have to deny access. So you'll get an error message back. Finally, once you go through these steps, you'll get a confirmation that you're all configured and good to go. And then you can X out of that box and you'll be off to the races. So for the last step in your event setup, after you've set up the Zoom app, you create your ticket types. Here you can choose between free, paid, and even donation types, and ensure you set the capacities available in each. So what's unique about the Zoom app is that you can enable your connected Zoom meeting or webinar to only be displayed to specific ticket types and or at a given time, whether that be absolute or relative. So as an example, let's say you're hosting like a celebrity chef cooking class via Zoom webinar. And it's an exclusive experience because, as you all know, Zoom webinars can be highly interactive, meaning that attendees can ask questions via chat. They can raise their hands, chime in on video if they want to show off their cooking skills. You may create a VIP ticket type for this more exclusive experience and say, okay, if they have a VIP ticket, I want them to get the Zoom webinar link. But then let's say you want to open up a second, less expensive ticket type where attendees will get access to a live stream of that cooking class. You could create a second view only or view live stream only ticket type and give those attendees access to a YouTube link or a Vimeo link. So you can make that distinction on who you want to receive which type of online event experience. If you want to limit access by ticket type, you can click on a small gear icon that's next to your Zoom webinar meeting details on that online events page setup editor. So now that we've looked at how the Zoom app works, here's a quick look at how it improves the attendees experience, which, as you guys know, if you've done online events, you know, it's a tough adjustment moving your events online and kind of getting that workflow in place where people are easily able to join with little friction. I'd note that for this webinar, we use the Zoom app, so your experience with your attendees would be quite similar. So first and foremost, the app turns off attendee emails from Zoom. This cuts down on the number of duplicative emails that your attendees will receive about your event. They'll only receive emails from Eventbrite confirming the information about your Zoom event. Registrants will also automatically receive access to your online events page. Remember, this is like your virtual venue. And as seen as the screenshot on the right, there is a CTA that has a countdown to your event. So 5 minutes before your event begins, this will turn orange and the CTA copy will update to join now. And this CTA drives attendees to their personalized Zoom link. This means that you never have to share your Zoom webinar password or link. You should never have to go near all of that. It's all happening automatically with this CTA. Lastly, automated attendee reminder emails are sent 48 hours, 2 hours, and 10 minutes before your event start time. And these are automatically stood up when you create your event. All of these emails drive attendees to that online events page or virtual venue so that they just have to click through and then click join now. There's nothing nuanced with having to go through the flow. The only thing is that if they're not logged in to Eventbrite, they're going to have to do that once again because we want to make sure your online event is secure and that only attendees are hitting that landing page. And also one exciting development here, you now have the ability to edit this email a little bit. So if you want to customize the send name, reply to email address, you can add custom body copy, you can play with the send time, and you can even send yourself test emails. So if you've ever wished that you had more control over this email, you finally have a little bit more there. So would love to hear feedback if this is new to you and you want to go ahead and check it out. All right, I'll pass it back to you, Viv.
Thank you so much. And that was such a great technical deep dive. You said something in the beginning about how Zoom is cross-generational. And I was thinking about the fact that I had a 6-year-old who was dialing into his class on Zoom this morning. And then I also talked to my grandma on Zoom last night. And it feels so true. It is this very often used integration. And the things that you just highlighted are making it all the more accessible for all of these different people who might have trouble with these confirmation emails and different links. So there were so many juicy things in there. And I know some people have a couple of specific follow-up questions in the Q&A. We'll try to get to a lot of these in the last 10 minutes. But just to answer one of the ones that came through, this is going to be recorded and uploaded to the Eventbrite YouTube channel. So if you did have to dial in a couple of minutes late or had an interruption, all the information will be recorded and streamed. So we will go ahead and send the link to that afterwards. And there's also some other great webinars on the YouTube channel, so people can learn a little bit more there. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and jump into sort of a real world example of how this new Zoom integration is being used by one team that we are just obsessed with over here at Eventbrite, and that's CraftJam. Before we dive into some of the nitty gritty here, I wanted to sort of give you a moment to set the stage for what CraftJam is. And you mentioned it a little bit when you introduced yourself, but just to give a quick high level overview, could you tell us a little bit about what CraftJam is all about, how you were operating before COVID, and then how things have sort of shifted in this new online world?
Yeah. So first of all, the obsession, goes back to you. There's a love relationship here.
Mutual obsession.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, I must say, before I talk about CraftJam, it was just amazing to work with Eventbrite, how you guys pivoted and really made sure that your product, helps us. And a lot of the features, I mean, I see the feedback we gave and I saw it happening. So you really listened to the creators, and thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you. We didn't ask her to say that. I just want to say that came, that was not in the script. Thank you, Nora. That means a lot to us. The team has been working so hard and it's a crazy time, but to hear that you're seeing the needs and the feedback reflected is just music to our ears.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier, really what we're doing is we're offering crafting experiences. So CraftJam is a vibrant community of crafters. A lot of them are beginners, and we offer these unforgettable, small, curated group experiences, and people can learn, craft, connect, and buy. So you can buy tickets to attend live streams. These are workshops, and then you learn how to watercolor, write calligraphy, do hand lettering, maybe macrame, all kinds of different workshops. And you can either buy our kits or use your own supplies. And how did it look pre-COVID, right? I mean, we were an IRL experience company, and we would come together. We had a little studio in Soho in New York. We did a lot of partnerships with hotels and different retailers, and we would send our kits, our boxes, our teachers, whom we call Jam Masters, to these locations, and then people would go there and basically, craft together. Yeah. So this wasn't really in the books. We hadn't really planned that, but I mean, during COVID, we couldn't host any IRL events anymore. So we decided to pivot to online, and it was not planned, but we're actually really glad we did, because suddenly we went from local to global, and already in the first few days and weeks, suddenly we had people from Bristol, from Australia, from Argentina, and actually being listed on Eventbrite. We ask always people, how did you hear about us? And I remember distinctly that gentleman from Bristol who took our hand lettering class said that, he saw it on Eventbrite, and many of people said that. So that was really helpful. So yeah. And I mean, we used to have all kinds of sizes of events IRL, and we started with the small events online, and now they became they started 10, 15 people, and we now do hundreds of people actually. And besides the ticketed events, we do a lot of corporate and private events too. This is one of our embroidery events, and what we do with our Jam Masters, they use two cameras. One focuses on the hand, the other one focuses on the face, so you can always see what they're making, but you also see their friendly face.
I love that so much. And I haven't actually had the opportunity to do one of the online classes, but looking at this embroidery one, I feel like I'm going to jump over and sign up for these so fast.
Yeah.
And it is so fun to hear how people discover things. And you highlighted, sort of outside of the Zoom app, one of the strange silver linings of this switch to digital events, which is that so many creators have been able to broaden their audiences. What before was limited by, geography or time zone, or even, physical accessibility. Some people can't leave their homes to come to in-person events. So it's been so, it's been really delightful to watch people broaden their audiences. Like you're mentioning, you have people from all over the world dialing in to be together. So as many things as are hard right now, that's great.
Yeah, and what happened, what was interesting too, that actually our repeat rate went up. People, even like frequent customers that we had, they came even more because they were looking for this community to join. And what I found really interesting that our NPS, our net promoter score, went up too. Just people really enjoyed the experience so much. So there were a few surprises in going online.
That's so fantastic to hear. And we can actually dive a little bit more into the specifics. So should we jump into the sort of discussion time, Erika? Is that what's up next? Perfect.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. And I can stop sharing just so that people don't have to stare at a slide while we're having our discussion.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful. All right, we'll go ahead and switch there. And hi to everyone if we haven't seen your faces, if you dialed in a couple of minutes late. Just to repeat, I'm Vivian with Eventbrite, and I'm here sort of fostering the conversation between Erika, who is our very brilliant product expert on the Zoom integration, and Nora, who's the CEO of CraftJam, and who will be taking us through some of the real world examples of how CraftJam is using it. So before we even dive into the Zoom integration itself, what made CraftJam go with Zoom in terms of all the digital platforms that are available right now?
I mean, people are going to think you pay me for this, but it was Eventbrite. So I read a blog post talking about how to use Zapier to connect Eventbrite with Zoom, and so we went to work and did that.
That's fantastic. And do you want to talk a little bit about, I know we talked briefly about it because you were one of our beta users and really experienced the app as we were building out the new integration, but you just mentioned using Zapier beforehand. What are some of the changes that you've seen since switching from the Zapier integration to this new Zoom integration?
Yeah, it's, I mean, things are a lot easier on the team side as well. I mean, on our team side as well as on the attendee side. And I mean, for the team, it's just, it saves so much time. And I mean, we love Zapier. We think it's a fantastic tool. But it just took a lot of time away. The setup, there was so much manual setup, and it was just easy also to make mistakes because there was so much manual. So many manual steps, and a lot of the time that people or that my team should focus on working with the attendees and creating content and helping the community was just, you know, wasted on things that don't make an impact on the customer. And then we got a lot of questions before the integration, before the Zoom app, about how to get into Zoom, because there were these two different services, two different names, brands, and a lot of people didn't understand that. So that took even more time of us, the whole hand holding. So yeah, I mean, it just from a time perspective for the team, for the customer experience, it was just a fantastic change.
That's so great to hear. And I think your team is a great example of a group that's really doing things at scale. You have many different, I think you call them jammers, who are the folks who are hosting and creating these workshops. And you have a lot of, you know, you have many, many events happening all the time. And so one thing that we heard loud and clear from our careers is that they needed to save time there. And that's amazing to hear. And you also want to have a happy team of jammers. As someone who's running a company, your customers are not only the people dialing in, but it's your team too who matters. That's so great to hear. So you mentioned that things are a little bit better for attendees. So the experience is more streamlined, and then you mentioned like your repeat rate has gone up, and you have your NPS, I think you mentioned, went up a little bit. What do you have any specific examples of how things are better for the attendees?
I think it's just very streamlined now. And I mean, we can talk a bit about best practices or learnings maybe, you know. I think that over time, we also learned how we had to tweak our experiences from offline to online in terms of run of show. You know, we had in IRL, people would always introduce themselves with their names, but now when you see people, and most people have on the screen, they have their little names. So maybe the introduction has to change, right? And just, you know, we learned a lot about timing and spacing. How much time do you actually need so you still have time to talk? And there were just a few differences from online. We did a lot of, we asked for a lot of feedback from our customers. So I really recommend after every event, make sure you have a survey that they can fill out that's not too long. We usually ask, you know, would you recommend us? That's for the NPS. If it's 8 or less, why can't you recommend us? And then we learn a lot if people don't like to recommend us. And I love the open-ended questions too in these feedbacks. And they were, you know, people want to help you. So if you ask them, they volunteer their time, and you can pick their brains.
That's so awesome. And it's like you mentioned, your audience has gotten so much bigger. And so handling, you want to get all the feedback and information, but you don't necessarily want to be bogged down in a lot of back and forth about people being confused on how to dial into Zoom. So more like productive conversation, less admin conversation was, you know, one of the big goals that we had with the new Zoom app. And sounds like it's coming through for your team. You did mention some of the pro tips. So CraftJam has been doing this for a long time, and it's really exciting to see the pivot to the online events. Do you have any sort of pro tips for, you mentioned a lot of the creator experience or the attendee experience side, but we have a lot of event creators here. What would you tell them as they make this switch to online events, or as they, you know, use the new Zoom app, or just try to grow their businesses online?
I think communication is so important, and just making sure that people feel prepared when they come and they know what to bring or what not to bring and what to expect. And also tell them these are our limitations. You know, don't overpromise. Just be, you know, really tell them what they expect. And I love that you can now edit the email that people get, because that's a good place where you can, you know, talk about what's different maybe from what they were used before.
Erika, I was just going to invite
say,
you.
I have a funny addition there. So I helped onboard creators one-on-one when we were initially doing the early beta of the Zoom app. And when we were stepping them through, you know, these are the different things you can edit in your reminder emails now, they would say, oh, you know, reminder emails are tough because historically they've come from Eventbrite, and a lot of attendees, even if the email has critical instructions about how to join the online event, I mean, we all do this. If you get an email, you may skim it and archive it and not realize, oh, my ticket to get into this event, which I need to like have authenticated, is actually in this email. So what's been helpful is, you know, as creators, we're saying, oh, we can update the send name to CraftJam and we can customize the subject line. We can actually tell people, read this. This is how you got into the event. And that's helped a lot with inbound communications, because as you know, you get into your online event and it's tough to manage if you're getting dozens of emails with people saying, I paid for this ticket for this online event and I can't get in. You know, that's not fun for anyone. So the more upfront communication you can do, the more frictionless it becomes for both sides.
I love that. And to sort of pull out a couple of the things I'm seeing pop out in the QA, Erika, could you talk a little bit more about the reminder emails? So as you mentioned, we have 3 pre-scheduled emails that go out, which, you know, were built on the feedback from creators about when the most useful times are to remind attendees, because Lord knows I have forgotten that I'm registered for an event and I get that pop up 10 minutes beforehand and I'm like, oh, thank goodness, like I almost missed this. How customizable are those? Can you delete them? Can you make your own?
Yeah, so they're customizable, I will say, to a degree. So there's some critical information that's just kind of templated. The biggest thing within the email content is that you can add body copy. It's not going to be the entire email. It's effectively a note from the creator within the email. So what I would say is you can also flex the timing. So if you find that 10 minutes pre-event is actually too soon and people aren't seeing it in time, you can make that 30 minutes before. You can completely customize that timing. You can also delete them. So if you only want one reminder email going out an hour before, you can do that. And then also I saw a question pop up. If you delete them, can you add them back? If you go to emails to attendees, you can create new campaigns. So just make sure that whatever your objective is reflected in your subject line, reflected in that body copy, and that the timing is where it needs to be. And I would also say the new test feature is really great. I know anytime I'm sending a big email, I love to send myself a test just to make sure it looks good. And now you can do that as many times as you want. So I would say great added flexibility.
That's fantastic. Kind of zooming a little bit farther back, Nora, you've brought up a couple of examples during the call already, but what are some of the biggest like obstacles that your team has overcome as you made this switch online, outside of, you know, the nitty-gritty technical aspect? Like, what are some of the things that were maybe surprising challenges or things that you expected? Oh, you're on mute. We're at Eventbrite, we decided we're going to get a t-shirt that says you're on mute, because we say it about 10 times a day.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm using these tools all day long and I still forget. Actually, this is one of the challenges that people do a lot of screen time. And, you know, and that can get tiring. So, you know, we're actually starting to experiment a bit with like Slack channels and just figuring out different ways of staying in touch. The other challenge for us was definitely the logistics for sending kits, because suddenly we started shipping and selling supplies. So, you know, they were, and we had to do this from our living rooms, bedrooms. You know, some people weren't at their homes. I mean, I was in my in-laws, and my husband's children bedroom, you know. So, so those were some of the, you know, logistical challenges. But you know, things I think that might apply to everyone really, understanding that consistency is so important. So figuring out that there's a certain kind of run of show or a certain kind of way where people just feel at home in your brand, and certain things, you know, could be rituals or just could be something that is recognizable, so they can actually differentiate your event from other events. Because everybody, you know, it's like you in IRL you used to have the location and the decoration of the room that already coming in made you different. But now everything kind of looks the same in a way. So trying to figure out what are these content or programmatic differences, I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think that folks are starting to figure out how they have these digital identities, because it's true, you can't necessarily create a space where you walk in, it suddenly transforms where you are. And you mentioned something at the beginning of the response that I think is so interesting. We all are overloaded with screen time. And one of the really beautiful things about CraftJam is you do have this tactile element where you ship out a kit and people have this like physically grounding thing.
Yeah.
That's obviously not going to apply to every creator. Not everyone is involved in that particular process, but it is something that I've talked to a lot of creators about. Like, for example, a lot of bookstores are going online and doing book talks and trying to ship out the book ahead of time, so you have that physical item. I think it helps balance out this like screen overload that we're experiencing. So those are some of the biggest challenges. And, you know, we mentioned some of the biggest like sort of pleasant surprises. And one of them was that you're seeing this explosive growth in terms of where your audience is able to participate from. Any other fun surprises that have come out of this strange shift?
Yeah, so I think one thing I mentioned, that our repeat rate went up a lot. It almost doubled. So that was a really fun surprise for us.
And
But
for
I think,
folks who might do one-off events, do you want to tell them how you measure, like what a repeat rate is?
oh yeah, it's basically is the same customer coming back, you know, and how many times and if they're coming back. So usually, you know, that shows you that you have a sticky product that people like. I think another fun surprise was just being able to actually remote train our teachers, our jam masters, and just having just a much bigger access to different talent. So I think that was a great surprise. And also just realizing that there are different tools that you can use to, you know, keep the community going and communicate and just like keep them engaged, which we wouldn't have done before. And I mentioned, for example, Slack before. So you can, you know, there's parallel, you know, you can use different tools and just have different levels of engagement.
Yeah, that's such a great point. I think that there's no one size fits all. And I think so many creators are learning how to go online. And then so many companies and tools and products are also realizing that this is a much more important part of people's businesses, and they're making changes. So, you know, like you mentioned, there's a lot of tools and there's a lot of ways to stay engaged. And I also think that CraftJam, I didn't mention this when we were talking about the technical stuff. I think you're a great example of using the Eventbrite product in a way that fits your business. So a perfect data point there is that you have some one-off events and then you have some series events. And to be totally transparent with the creators dialing in right now, our Zoom app isn't quite perfect for our series or repeating event feature yet, but it's really great for these one-offs. And so CraftJam's found a way to use it for the events that make sense and avoid it for the ones where it's going to be less helpful and cause a little bit more friction.
Yeah. By the way, I just remembered one thing that's also really great, a surprise. So now we have recorded events, and a lot of people like to watch the recording to go deeper into the skills or just to take the same class again. So that's a really great side effect too.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, people's schedules are different, and on-demand content, I think, is such a powerful tool. You know, as we all start thinking about this shift back to real life, whenever it happens and however it happens, it'll be different for all of us based on where we are. And I think it'll probably also be like we go back to the real world and we might have to sort of shelter in place again. Is CraftJam thinking about changing your model and incorporating online events in the future?
Absolutely. And our customers are asking for it. I mean, we had a lot of feedback of people saying, once we can go IRL again, please don't stop the online events.
That's
And
so cool.
yeah, so the future is, I say it's an omni experience. It doesn't matter if you see each other in pixels or, if you can sit in front of each other. So it's
Yeah.
gonna be there.
We're seeing, I think, a lot of that from our creators and our attendees at Eventbrite, where, human beings want to gather. Like, they just like being together. They like sharing their interests. They like sharing space. And we've all learned that, like, while we ache for that sharing of physical space, this online has some really incredible upsides. And we're hearing a lot of folks say, like you just repeated, hybrid events and its omni experience, I love that term, is something that will probably be a part of us in the future. So, like, getting this skill set to do really successful online events, it will benefit you now, but it's probably going to continue to pay off as we figure out what the future looks like. Um, I want to be respectful of time, and I see we have a ton of great questions coming in. Before I kick things over, because a lot of it's really technical for Erika, we have someone who asked, and Nora, I think this is a great question for you. What advice would you give to a new art studio or new creator who is starting online events?
I think the most important thing is to understand who's your customer and actually talk to them. So before we launched online, we did a poll, or we did a survey that we sent to our IRL customers, just kind of understanding what they want and what they're expecting. And we also talked to them and we followed up. I mean, for every business, it's going to be different. And just start with your really engaged, passionate customers, and they will point you the way.
I love that. Yeah. If we don't have our audiences, that's what the work is for. And so listening to them and creating things in line with what they want is the best way to be successful.
Absolutely.
Erika, how do you want to dive into a lot of the great questions that we've gotten? I know that we had some ones from the form that we pre-submitted, and I think we're seeing a little bit of the themes echo into the live Q&A here. Do you want to kick us off and guide us through some of our Q&A?
Yeah, definitely. I think let's go ahead and start off with some of the pre-submitted questions that people sent in. And again, some really good questions. So really appreciate everyone who took the time to submit it there. And then we can recheck time and see if we can cherry pick any of these live Q&A ones. So the first question came from Kate, who said, I am running events for kids where people who purchase the ticket are parents. I want them to see the Zoom meeting ID and password details straight away when they click on the online events page, as they normally log in the kid from another device using these details. Are you planning to make the Zoom meeting details visible for registrants right away? Right now, this is inconvenient. This is a really good question and a little bit nuanced. So as I mentioned, as soon as you configure the Zoom app, it will automatically turn off the Zoom automated attendee emails that you typically will get from Zoom that has the link you click on, the dial-in, the password. As I mentioned, just because we don't want to inundate attendees with the same information, and as if we can keep it a unified Eventbrite and your branded experience, it's just a little bit smoother. Additionally, some of the creators that we work with do want to keep this meeting information under lock and key. So one question I saw come in is about Zoom bombing. One of the best ways to prevent it is to make sure people aren't getting access to your join link or your password if it's password protected. And we accomplish this by effectively hiding that information behind that Join Now button on the online events page. So if your attendees never have a need to find that meeting ID and link, then it'll be harder for them to copy and paste it to their friends on the internet who might jump in, and you may not want them there. So a couple of interesting use cases we're having to navigate with this, but that said, we have definitely heard from some creators who, like Kate, want this information to be visible. So what I would advise is go ahead and turn the Zoom emails back on, and you can delete the Eventbrite reminder emails if that's easier for you. But that way, you know that your attendees who are parents logging their kids on maybe an iPad, they're able to just look at that Zoom email and type it in. They don't need to get on the online events page from their child's device and do it that way. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and a great call out on the Zoom bombing. I think this is something that happened a lot in COVID as people were learning what sort of security settings they needed, and as more and more people sort of had too much time on their hands to bomb other people's beautiful events. So the new integration definitely helps with security. And then we've actually published a couple of helpful posts on the Eventbrite blog about how you can take some additional steps to really make sure that your event stays for who it's supposed to be for.
Absolutely. All right, so the next question is for Nora from Allison, who asked, I've seen what CraftJam is doing for virtual events, and we've had a harder time finding our groove, specifically with keeping participants engaged during our virtual events. Do you have any tips for this?
Yeah, I mean, it always depends a bit on the size of the group as well. So you have to figure out what's the right size for your type of activity online. And you might have to cut it down a bit so you can allow the teacher or leader of the group to really engage with the different people, ask specific questions and give good feedback. And then also in the end, allow maybe for some time for people to just chat. I mean, I think it's really, really important to make sure that, you know, like for us during crafting, we can ask people, hey, show me your project. Do you have any questions? And so think about what kind of questions that could be for you to make sure people feel listened to and can give you a response.
Love that. Thanks, Nora. All right, the next question I pulled comes from Liz, and it is a three-parter. So Liz asked, I've been using Zoom for years to teach classes on the body, but I've never run a webinar. And as my classes grow, I'd like to try a webinar format. So 1, is that possible? 2, is the setup different between Eventbrite and Zoom? And 3, is there a way through Eventbrite to email participants to the webinar if they could not attend? Another great question, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier on, but with Zoom, the webinar feature is an add-on that you'll have to purchase separately. In addition to, let's say you have a pro account with unlimited meetings, webinars are still going to be a separate thing. So as I mentioned, when we were going through how it works, if you select webinars, but you don't have that in your Zoom account, you're going to hit an error. So make sure you're set up on the Zoom side. But once you have access, the setup is really the same through the Zoom app. Just on that dropdown, you select webinars, but it's similar in that you'll select your existing webinar or create a new one. There are some additional features and functionality on the Zoom side. If you want to add more advanced settings, just know you have that option, but the configuration on the Eventbrite side is basically the same. For your last mini question about emailing participants who didn't attend, in short, yes. As I mentioned, you know, as your participants join that webinar, they'll be marked as checked in on Eventbrite, which is great, right? Especially if you're running classes where you need to take attendance, whatever your use case might be. It's good to see your actual turnout rate, especially for free events when we know a lot of people register, but it's kind of a moving target as to how many will show up. So what I would advise here is at the end of your event, you could jump in and see which attendees were marked as checked in. And for those who were not, you can create a new email and create a new segment. The only thing is you'll have to manually select those users, which if it's 50 people isn't super scalable. I'd also note that I surfaced this with the email team, and I'm going to place a request for it because it feels like kind of a no-brainer that you should be able to send a specific email to people who weren't marked as checked in. But one thing you can also do if you have a high number of no-shows is you can export those users and upload them into your ESP, your email service provider, whether you use MailChimp, Constant Contact, Emma, and actually send them a dedicated campaign. That way you can track your open rate, click rate, and see the specific users who aren't opening. So a little bit nuanced, but more to come there, hopefully soon from us. Next question comes from Kyle. He asked, I rely on custom questions for my events. Will these work if I'm using the Zoom app? This is a great question. I'm so glad you asked this, Kyle. So in short, you can keep your custom questions as long as they're on the Eventbrite side. If you input custom questions on the Zoom side, it'll actually prevent your attendees from properly syncing. So just make sure if you're used to asking those questions on the Zoom side, just ask them on the Eventbrite side. And if you have them set up for an existing event on the Zoom side, you can go ahead and disable them or even make them optional and you should be fine. So again, just keeping the flow a little bit smoother. Another question from Richard to Nora. Have you found that it's best to send emails to attendees through Eventbrite? Do you mainly send your own emails through your own ESP, or do you use a combination of both?
I mean, there's some, generally, whenever we can, we like to send it through CraftJam, that the recipient sees CraftJam, because then the opening rate is higher. So whenever you have the chance to do that, I would do that.
Okay, that's great. And then Natalia submitted a question live that I want to kind of piggyback off of that. Natalia asked, how many reminders would you advise to send? We like to send our branded event reminders through external email platform with the CTA, including the Zoom link. In the past, we combine our branded reminders and Eventbrite ones. How many is too many? This is one I have so many opinions on. I would say for your events, don't send more than 3. We've all kind of interacted with brands where we get 100,000 emails and all you want to do is hit that unsubscribe. So you want to kind of strike that balance of making sure your attendees have the info they need without bombarding them. The other thing that I would encourage is just consistency. So as Nora does, if you typically send certain campaigns through your own ESP, keep doing it that way, keep providing the branded experience they're used to. But if you know that when you stand up an online event with the Zoom app, you want to rely on those 3 emails that are automatically going to be there, go ahead and leave that in place across all of your events, so that if I'm one of those return customers who's doing every CraftJam, I know that 10 minutes to 30 minutes to whenever before that event, I'm going to see that info in my inbox. All right, so jumping back to the pre-submitted questions, we've got one more, and this final question comes from Robin, who said, I read that the automatic attendee check-in is based on email address matching. I have attendees who typically use different email addresses for Eventbrite than they use for Zoom. Will this create issues? Another great question to finish this on. So you're correct in that the attendee check-in does rely on the email addresses matching between Eventbrite and Zoom. And this goes back to our efforts to help make your events more secure and make sure that the people who are joining are the people who bought tickets and no one else. But to do that, we are looking at, okay, if I know that Vivian at Eventbrite bought a ticket, as soon as she logs into the Zoom, I'm looking for Vivian at Eventbrite because I know that's the same person. So this understandably, can create a little bit of friction if people use maybe a work email for the Eventbrite event and then a personal email for Zoom. What it just means is that the hosts will have to approve them before they join the meeting or the webinar. So a little bit of extra manual work, and you can navigate that in the way that makes sense for the size of your event. But that's another good pro tip to include in your event description, include it in your reminder email, because they can always update their information to make it a little bit more seamless. So I think we are just about out of time. So really appreciate all of the amazing questions that the group submitted. I'm going to get to work on getting answers for a lot of these questions, and we'll make sure that everything is addressed in the follow-up email that we'll send by the end of the week. As Vivian mentioned, this will also have a link to a survey, and I see these email responses. So if you have any feedback or if you have any additional questions, we're here. I would add that this app is still young and we're still working to massage some kinks and make sure that everything is, built to meet as many use cases as it can, but we need your help to do that. So welcome any and all feedback. Otherwise, any final thoughts from Vivian or Nora?
I would love to sort of second that and say that I've been trying to keep an eye. I know a lot has come in through the Q&A channel here, and some of these are a couple pieces of good product feedback. A couple of you had some specific little irregularities that we're seeing, and then also just some really great really unique use cases. So thank you. And if anyone is going to be able to tackle the breadth of what we're seeing, it's this genius we have on the line, Erika, who is responsible for, building this app and making sure that it meets so many needs, right out the gate. And as she said, we're just going to keep working on improving this, because online events, while COVID may hopefully go away soon, online events, I think, are here to stay. And we want to make sure that it is a seamless and useful part of your business going forward as possible. So I just want to give a huge thank you to Nora for your time on this call, and also just for doing the beautiful work that you're doing and building community and creating some joy in people's lives. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And I want to say thank you to everyone who dialed in. As I mentioned, we'll go ahead and put this up on YouTube, and we'll do more of these in the future. So stay tuned to the Eventbrite channels. Feel free to reply to this survey and let us know if you have any other things that you want to see and topics that we can cover. But thank you all so much for your time, for your energy, for everything that you're doing for your event attendees, and for, letting Eventbrite be a part of your business and a part of your success. We're really excited to see what everyone's doing, and can't wait to keep helping you in the future. And on that note, I think we'll say goodbye and see you all in the inbox channel.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.